What is good, gamers, and today only, weeaboos. Welcome to a new video where I'm going to go full on conspiracy theory on you because I believe I have cracked something big. Over the last year or so, you might have noticed in the credits a certain anime studio popping up in a few Nintendo releases. And gamers, I know you've been paying attention and you saw this. That company is MAPPA, another Japanese juggernaut which, not unlike Nintendo, is the king of its respective industry. For reference, in 2024's Emio the Smiling Man Famicom Detective Club, which by the way, you have got to play this game. It is stuck underground, and while I don't want the normies to take over, it is so freaking good. So please pick up this game if you haven't already. You will not regret it. MAPPA had a huge contribution to this game in a very special way that I don't want to spoil because it's sort of integral to the plot, but trust me, if you beat the game, you know what I'm talking about. You might have thought that was just a cool one-off collab, but wouldn't you know it, in 2025, for Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, we also see MAPPA's name pop up in the credits. Basically, it seems like Nintendo and MAPPA have been getting awfully chummy lately, and then it hit me. A MAPPA Nintendo official anime collaboration. And here's the thing, 10 years ago this might have sounded crazy, but over the Switch generation, Nintendo has evolved from just a video game company into a multimedia empire. These guys have released a Mario movie, have a sequel coming out next year, and a live-action Zelda movie in 2 years. They have 3 theme park locations, and whether through their own ventures like Alarmo or Nintendo Music, or collaborations with other companies, Nintendo has also infiltrated the lifestyle market. Essentially, Nintendo is doing everything they can to leverage their own IP for maximum exposure, and again, as I mentioned earlier, become a multimedia empire. So while it might have sounded a little outlandish 10 years ago to suggest an official Nintendo anime, these days, I actually feel like there's a very strong chance we'll see something like that pop up over the next couple of years. And since Nintendo has seemingly been courting MAPPA over these last few video game projects, why not collab with them for an official Nintendo anime? So, with that in mind, I wanted to discuss which IP have the highest likelihood of becoming an anime, at least according to this retard. Alrighty, so first off, we got Splatoon. Splatoon is a relatively recent Nintendo IP, but it has seen massive financial success. Seriously, people who are still acting like Splatoon isn't a big deal, I implore you to look at the sales figures. Even on the failure that was the Wii U, Splatoon almost sold 5 million units, becoming one of the best-selling games on that system. This was a new IP, by the way, outselling the likes of Hyrule Warriors, Pikmin 3, and a lot of other Nintendo series that had an entry on the Wii U. And then, for Splatoon 2, 13.6 million units. That is more than every Metroid game combined, more than every Pikmin game combined, more than Donkey Kong has sold, more than WarioWare, more than even the average Zelda game has sold before the Switch era. And if you think Splatoon 2 was just a fluke, Splatoon 3, as of March 2024, is at 11.96 million units. I guarantee by now it's over 12 million. That retention rate is insane for a same system sequel. Honestly, same system sequels is a topic for an entirely other video, but even retaining 2/3 of your previous game's sales is really impressive. So the fact that this game has almost matched that, and who knows, in the future if there's some sort of Switch 2 edition, could even surpass Splatoon 2 sales, that is freaking crazy. But of course, there's more than just the sales as to why I think Splatoon would make a good candidate. There's also been an ongoing Splatoon manga series since I believe around 2015-2016, very shortly after the first game released, and it's still going to this day. I have not personally read this manga, although I have heard people say it's pretty good, and I mean, again, if it's still continuing 10 years later, it must be at least somewhat interesting. And then I guess this is just a little bit of a crazy prediction, but assuming that Splatoon actually does get an anime adaptation, I was thinking Splatoon 1 is on the precipice of its 10-year anniversary, which, yikes, I am dying fast. But the fact that this game is almost 10 years old leads me to believe there could be some sort of special Splatoon series direct coming up. If you remember, after the Nintendo Switch January 2017 presentation, Nintendo held a general Fire Emblem Direct about 1 or 2 weeks later, and so I was thinking, why not repeat that again, but this time for Splatoon? They could announce a Nintendo Switch 2 edition for Splatoon 3, they could announce the Splatoon anime, and even tease that Splatoon 4 is currently in the works for Nintendo Switch 2. But yeah, just to recap my reasoning, the Splatoon series has been very financially successful, and there's already a manga template that they could follow for an anime adaptation if they wanted to do that. Also, kind of like the Pokemon anime series, Splatoon is a very evergreen series in nature, and honestly there's no definitive endpoint. Sure, they could tackle these story campaigns from each core game if they wanted to, but they could also just keep making up tournaments or different training arcs to go on basically forever, or at least until they feel like they're done with the series. But okay, let's move on to my second main candidate, and that is Fire Emblem. Now this one I'm taking a little bit of a different approach. I am going very personal bias on this because for years now I have envisioned this. Every time I go to the gym and run on the treadmill, I throw on Apex of the World, and I can perfectly see, like, I've written the script, I've written the screenplay, I can envision the ending scene to a Fire Emblem Three Houses anime that matches up perfectly with that song, and man, I just want to see Three Houses adapted into an anime. I would love this, and I think that there's a lot of reason to believe that Fire Emblem, and specifically I'm hoping for a Fire Emblem Three Houses anime adaptation, is possible. First off, with the financial reasoning, Fire Emblem Three Houses is not only the best-selling Fire Emblem game at a shocking 4.1 million units as of June 2022, so by now it's probably even a couple 100,000 more than that, but it's also the best-selling strategy role-playing game of all time. It also received universal fanfare from both the critics, which I don't really care about, but more importantly, the players. People love this game, and that is evident by how healthy and prosperous the fandom is even to this day. There is still a ton of new fan art, a ton of new fan works, a ton of new mods, a ton of new randomizers, all that stuff being uploaded every single day. Even now, almost 6 years after the game released. And one of the things that everybody loved so much about this game was the story. It was so freaking good, and that's even considering the fact that they actually had to make a few fairly substantial cuts or adjustments in order to have the game ready for release. So I'm thinking that with this anime adaptation, they could properly flesh out the entire story they wanted to originally tell back when the game was released. And I know what you're thinking. Fire Emblem Three Houses is a game with 3 different routes, technically 4, but there's 3 main campaign paths. How could they properly adapt that? Well, my bias would say just go with the Blue Lions route because I do think that makes for the most interesting story. It's a very classic hero's journey and it's so freaking good. But, and bear with me because I know what I'm about to propose is absolutely mental, but what if they just do all of the different routes? So essentially the story could be basically the same, more or less, up until the time skip, but then after that they could just kind of branch out into 3 different routes. I don't know, I think that'd be kind of awesome. Just see all 3 of them visualized on the screen. And if that's a little too unrealistic, they could also go the route of an online poll where they basically ask people, hey, which path do you want to see adapted into the anime? Again, you know I'm going to be campaigning hard for the Blue Lions to get that nomination, if such a thing were to happen in this very hypothetical scenario I've created. Now, I wanted to look at MAPPA's overall projections for upcoming projects, and I was also curious to see where the Attack on Titan studio has been, or where the Vinland Saga studio has been. And look, compared to Nintendo, I don't really know that much about how the anime industry works, or about, leaks and kind of the structure of companies, so this is admittedly a very surface level, understanding of it. But anyways, I was noticing that Jun Shishido, who was the director for Attack on Titan, the final season, I think it was maybe from part 2 onwards, has not done anything with the company since then. Now maybe there's a lot more overlap at MAPPA in terms of people working on different projects than there is at something like Nintendo, where you kind of have like the 3D Mario team and the Zelda team and all that stuff. But if there is a quote Shishido team, it doesn't seem like they've announced what they're working on next. Now I know there was sort of a director's cut of the final part of Attack on Titan that released in theaters last November, And while I certainly think that's cool, I wouldn't imagine that was quite as demanding as an entire new anime series, as it seemingly was just kind of, tidying up some of the scenes, maybe adding a few more effects, redrawing some stuff just to make it all a little cleaner. So I guess this is my proposition, and I know this is just pure, fanfic at this point, but what if the AOT team was actually working on a Fire Emblem 3 Houses adaptation? Holy frick, man, I would lose my mind. That would be so epic, and I feel like, thematically that would actually kind of match what they just worked with. Fire Emblem 3 Houses also has a bunch of unique characters, each with their own goals, their own motivations, populated in this very rich world with a lot of lore, a lot of history, these great, culminating story arcs that bring everything together. It's honestly, there is a lot of overlap, I think, at least in terms of things you might enjoy from both series and kind of the general tones and that sort of thing. Tell me that the AOT studio would not absolutely destroy a Fire Emblem 3 Houses adaptation. I think they're primed to do it. So lock it in. At one of these upcoming investor meetings this year, they're just gonna randomly drop a key art visual and be like, boom, Nintendo is working with MAPPA on a Fire Emblem 3 Houses anime adaptation. It's releasing fall 2026. You heard it here first. But anyways, I guess that kind of wraps up my campaigning for a Fire Emblem 3 Houses adaptation. Let's just rapid fire a few other potential nominees for a Nintendo IP anime. There's Xenoblade, there's Kid Icarus, there's Takamaru's Ninja Castle, there's F-Zero. I guess they could do like a Dragalia Lost one. I feel like that's kind of like the main choices. Way back in the day, there was a movie adaptation of Animal Crossing that was, of course, anime, and it was very good. So I don't know, I guess they could bring that back too if they wanted. Really, they could do anything, but I stick with Splatoon and Fire Emblem being the most likely, and in my opinion, probably the best fits for a MAPPA Nintendo anime adaptation collaboration. But anyways, what do you guys think? Am I crazy, or is this totally happening? Let me know in the comments below, and if you have any ideas for a Nintendo anime, I'd love to hear them. Alright, I will catch you guys later. Peace.